And I invite Zozulchak, Vladlen Olegovich, researcher, Donetsk People's Republic, Donetsk. Vladlen Olegovich, Mr. Zozulchak, was born in Donetsk, graduated from the East Ukrainian National University, named after Vladimir Dal, Lugansk. Specialty, publishing and editing. Works as a commercial author and editor. Mr. Zozulchak wrote for electronic magazines Habr, Mail, and or Chalk, and Lifehacker. Vladimir Olegovich Zozulchak, Materialistic Dialectics in the Secret Doctrine and the Letters of Mahatmas.
Dear participants of the Congress, one of the key points expressed by Helena Petrovna, this is the proposal that all the truths came from the East. Normally, this thesis want to be proved by drawing parallels between Eastern teachings and the views of outstanding Western idealist philosophers like Immanuel Kant, Schelling, Hegel, and Fichte. This was done also by Helena Petrovna herself. Myself, in turn, will try to show that curious parallels also exist between theosophy and the materialistic teachings of the West. The beginning of this, by the way, was laid by Helena Petrovna herself. In her unfinished article, Spinoza and Western Philosophers, she attempts to give a brief outline of the development of Western philosophy. It is noteworthy that she begins with Epicurus, according to her own assessment, the greatest materialist who ever lived on earth. At the same time, she calls him a theosophist, because he devoted his whole life to the study of natural sciences and the analysis of divine activity in its relation to nature. But this is not the only point where theosophy comes into contact with materialism. There are more curious references in the letters of the Mahatmas. Theosophy and Holberg, the name of the German-French philosopher Paul-Henri Thierry Holbach, is mentioned twice in the letters of the Mahatmas, and his views are extremely highly appreciated, thus discussing the false idea of a monotheistic God. The teacher writes, "The God of theologians is just an imaginary power. Un loup-garou, as Golbach put it, a power that has never yet manifested itself. The theological crutch, which has been the direct cause of almost all human disasters for countless centuries." And in another letter, it is even clearer. "Strangely enough, I found a European author, the greatest materialist of his time, Baron Holbach, whose views completely coincide with the views of our philosophy. While reading his essays sur la nature, I could imagine that our book Qt is in front of me. In view, can you imagine what high appreciation is this? No one of Western philosophers was awarded such a highly estimation from the teachers. In view of this, it is not surprising that researchers found in the famous letter about God as many as 17 quotations and paraphrases from Holbach's system of nature. And this resembles the second part of Isidore Unveiled. In addition, by a remarkable coincidence, the title of one of Holbach's books, Christianity Exposed, or Consideration of the Principles of the Christian Religion and Its Consequences, partly anticipates the title of Helena Petrovna's first book, Isis Exposed, the second part of which is also devoted to a critical examination of institutional religion, primarily Christianity. So there is a reason to see Holbach among the predecessors of modern theosophy, but at the same time he was the forerunner of another philosophy, dialectical materialism. Summing up the Eastern philosophy in the quoted already work about Epicurus and Western philosophers, Helena Petrovna summarizes Eastern philosophy in this way: there is nothing in the universe but substance or nature. This substance exists by itself and through itself. It's called Svabhavat in Sanskrit. It was never created and it had no creator. But it is also a view of the world characteristic of dialectical materialism. Thus, the Philosophical Encyclopedic Dictionary defines matter as an infinite set of all objects and systems existing in the world, the substrate of any properties, connections, relationships, and forms of movement. The whole world around us is a moving matter in its infinitely diverse forms and manifestations, with all its properties, connections, and relationships. From the point of view of dialectical materialism, matter is absolute in the sense that it is unconditional, existing in itself, uncreated, eternal, and universal. In addition, the processes of cosmogenesis described in the secret doctrine are in many ways a detailed illustration of the laws of dialectics. The unity and struggle of opposites, the transition of quantitative changes into qualitative ones, the negation of the negation itself. Thus, the second logos, spirit matter, and the third logos, Mahat, represent a dialectical triad: thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Of course, it is only on this basis that an equal sign cannot be placed between theosophy and dialectical materialism. Dialectical materialism neglects the religions by criticizing conventional religion and teaching of universal ethics. Dialectical materialism simultaneously loses sight of the inner wisdom that is inherent in great religions and refuses to recognize the true and universal spirituality of Eastern philosophy. But it's very important to underline that dialectical materialism has the means how to overcome its own limitations. Theosophy, on the other hand, suggests a middle way between traditional religious dogmatism and the complete denial of religion. Nevertheless, even in the materialistic dialectic itself, there are means to go beyond its own limitations. Thus, in his unfinished work, Dialectics of Nature, Friedrich Engels writes that the more people learn to realize the consequences of their actions, the more they will again not only feel but also realize their unity with nature. Then the senseless and unnatural idea of some kind of opposition between spirit and matter, man and nature, soul and body will become impossible. So you can interpret these words in different ways, but I see in them a hint that the ultimate goal of human development is classic saw in the expansion of consciousness, up to the complete unity of a man with the cosmos. Interestingly, Blavatsky's name is mentioned in the collected works of Marx and Engels, which were published in the Soviet Union. However, this is only a brief mention. It was mentioned in a letter dated April 30. In 1891, Engels informs Karl Kautsky that Annie Besant joined grandmother Blavatsky's Theosophists. An additional note, this is just a brief note, but an editorial note is the index of names impartially reports that Helena Petrovna Blavatsky is a Russian writer. Her literary pseudonym Radabai. Summing up, I want to note, upon careful study, it turns out that in the secret doctrine and letters of the Mahatmas, there are features of materialistic dialectics, as well in the dialectical materialism, there are glimpses of an Eastern worldview. This is due to the fact that, as Helena Petrovna said, in Western philosophy, it is difficult to find any idea that has not already been anticipated by the East. From Kant to Herbert Spencer, everything is just a more or less distorted echo in Sanskrit, Dvaita, Advaita, and Vedantic doctrines in general. Thank you for your attention.
Mr. Zozulchak, thank you so much for such an interesting report and interesting facts that actually are known by our community and were pronounced here for the first time. Thank you so much for your report, for your research, for equality with theosophy that you mentioned, and it's so important to confirm the fact that materialistic dialectics is a way to go beyond our limits. And actually, that is what we are doing. Thank you so much. Welcome to Donbass.